part of Notre Dame. Mike Frank, Irish Sports Daily, joins us on 365 Sports. Mike, was this destined to be before even Riley Leonard entered the portal?
Well, I think, you know how this goes. I think that there's not supposed to be any sort of communication and all this kind of stuff. But, if you follow this as close as you do, you know that there's stuff being said back and forth amongst these, maybe not the actual prospect and the coaching staff, but intermediaries, I guess, is what you'd call it. It's just, I have a feeling that Notre Dame had been trying to figure out who would potentially be the guy. And I think this happens everywhere. I think that you see, a lot of places that are reaching out and trying to figure out what their options are and to get a better understanding of what kind of an offense they can have and what type of players they need to find. So, it's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's going on anyway.
So why Riley Leonard as the fit over any of the other portal quarterbacks that may have been available?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And when you look at his accuracy numbers, especially this year, they don't necessarily look very good. But I have a feeling, I think a big part of this is Notre Dame is losing both their tackles. And because of that, I think they know that there's going to be some pass rush issues. They're going to have some pressure. And so I think they wanted a guy who is big and strong, and he's 6'4", 230 pounds, but also somebody who can run. And if you can run the zone read, and they got some backs who have great vision, can hit it up inside, but also have the ability to get outside. And I think if they can run the zone read with Riley Leonard, it's going to open up a lot on the defense, and it's also, on the offense, and it's also going to keep the defense honest. I think they're worried about upfield pressure with those young tackles that they'll be playing next year, and so I think that had as much to do with it as anything. It's just trying to make sure that you force a defense to be honest and not cheat so much. And unfortunately, that's what happened a lot this year with Notre Dame's offense. It became a little bit too predictable, and when you don't have a guy who can run and avoid pressure, it makes it a little bit difficult. So I think that had a lot to do with it. If just in my personal opinion.
Mike, what's the feeling around South Bend when it comes to this second season under Marcus Freeman? 9-3, obviously have a chance at 10 wins, but what's just sort of the pulse of the room when it comes to his tenure so far?
If you ask Irish fans, they love Marcus Freeman. They love him as a representative of the university. He's a good person. I feel like everybody's behind him and wants him to succeed. I think that some people have some question about him retaining his offensive coordinator. Jared Parker is in his first year as an offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He has a little bit of experience at West Virginia, but if you believe the stories, he had that ability taken away from him based off of things that have been said at West Virginia because they weren't happy with the situation. And to be honest, Notre Dame's offense at times looked like a high school offense. It was very, very predictable. Part of that was just having a lot of young, inexperienced receivers, but also a lot of injured guys at wide receiver. At one point, they were starting, two true freshmen, and a third freshman who came as a walk-on. I mean, that's what they were down to. So it's kind of hard to be an effective offense when that's your starters at wide receiver. And so, they had a bad hand dealt to them in the wide receiver room. That certainly impacted things. And then I think a little bit of an inexperience with Jared Parker also impacted Notre Dame's offense. So I think a lot of fans look at it and say, look, if you're going to have an inexperienced head coach, you better have an experienced coordinators. And so if you remember, they had the problem last year where they thought Andy Ludwig was in fold, and there's your experienced offensive coordinator. Well, that fell apart at the very last minute. And so essentially less than 2 weeks away, Notre Dame was out without an offensive coordinator from spring practice. And so it kind of forced their hand to hire Jared Parker. And I know that Marcus Freeman has a lot of faith in Jared Parker, and Parker did do some very nice things in the offense. I just feel like a lot of people felt it should have evolved a little bit more, especially when you have a 60-year quarterback and a guy who's had a lot of experience, and they just felt like it should have gotten better. But so Marcus Freeman, it sounds like, is going to keep Jared Parker, and then we'll just see how it goes. I don't have any indication of how it's going to go, but it's his choice to make, and we'll see how it all unfolds.
Mike, you mentioned that wide receiver room, which has been, widely turned over this offseason. And, they've got more guys in the portal than they've gotten out right now. But the two that they've gotten out, Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins, are pretty huge additions for the Irish. And probably maybe you don't get a quarterback like Riley Leonard without guys like that in the fold.
Obviously. And I think that was, part of, as you talked about at the beginning, kind of how much of this is prearranged. So I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion about this and amongst those guys. And so, look, Bo Collins is exactly what they need. Right now, they don't even have what I'd consider a true boundary receiver. They have a guy in Deion Colsey's, but he's been banged up and hasn't been able to play all year. And he was really the only legit boundary receiver they had. And so, adding Bo Collins was a must. They brought one in as a freshman, but obviously you don't want to play another freshman if you don't have to. So they're hoping Colsey will stick around and be healthy, and Bo Collins will play boundary. But they also, what they ended up with was a whole bunch of guys who are best suited for slot, and not a lot of guys who can play field and boundary. And so Mitchell brings that field speed and the ability to get vertical and make some plays in space and use the field to make those plays. He brings that. So he was another big addition to this class. And I wouldn't be surprised. It sounds like they're trying to maybe go find another boundary just to make sure that they have things covered there. They got plenty of slots and plenty of smaller guys with speed. They just need to find another boundary. And, it would be nice if they could somehow find another field receiver, but they've got some guys that can play it, and they got a freshman in Cam Williams who they think can play pretty early, and he's a special player. So, the wide receiver room was a tough situation. They had Chancey Stuckey here. It did not work out for whatever reason. And some guys left because they didn't like the situation with Chancey Stuckey. And then some left because he left. So, it's one of those things. Eventually what it is a bunch of guys who didn't play much. And, because they didn't play, were looking for reasons for not playing versus, their own inability to earn, a starting position. There are a lot of guys who had a lot of complaints, but, when a walk-on soccer or lacrosse player beats you out, it's not because the coach hates you. You're just not doing your job. So that's the reality of it.
Mike, what is next for them now that they've got quarterback? And, I know that you're never going to send no to another big-time skill player if you get one, but now that they've got quarterback sewn up and wide receiver pointed in the right direction, what do you think's next?
Well, they really need to get some safeties. And they got a guy from Arizona State, Jordan Clark, who can play kind of nickel in some safety, and he fits the need, but they really need some safeties. They're hoping that Xavier Watts, who's an All-American, will come back and not declare for the draft. Sounds like there's a chance that's going to happen, but they're extremely thin at the safety position. And some of the young guys they have both been banged up. The two guys that they've had that are kind of the next in line, one's kind of got a shoulder injury, and the other's been dealing with some leg issues. So it's a really kind of a need position, and it wouldn't surprise me if they took two safeties when it was all said and done. I know they'd love to find an offensive tackle just to make sure that they have somebody, but, gosh, if you're a 6-year offensive tackle and you're worth anything, you're in the NFL because obviously that's a need position there. So that may be a little bit tough for them to deal with. I know that they've been after R.J. Oden, who is a pass rusher from Duke. He came and visited this past weekend. A lot of people think that he'll end up at Notre Dame. He's exactly what they need. They need kind of a big end, and he's got a lot of experience in what I call man strength. They need somebody who can defend the run there, but also be a plus pass rusher, and he's exactly what they're looking for. So if they land him, that's going to be a very good situation for them.
Mike, what's the appetite for El Paso and the Sun Bowl against Oregon State? What's the feel around that game coming up at the end of the month?
Well, it's kind of crazy because it's essentially a spring game. Nobody knows who's playing, and we haven't really seen these guys, so you just don't even know what you're going to see. I mean, as you mentioned, the wide receiver room's been depleted, essentially, and they're going to get a couple guys back who have been injured, so that's going to help there. Notre Dame's starting tight end is out for the year with a ACL, so he's gone. You're losing a couple tackles; they're gone. You lost Audric Estime, your running back. We know that they have some good running backs behind them. So, the offense, it'll be fairly similar, but you're starting a brand new quarterback in Steve Angeli, who we've seen play, and he looks pretty good, but it's mainly mop-up duty, and so you just don't really know. And then it'll be interesting to see what Steve Angeli does. Now that you bring in a Riley Leonard, does Steve Angeli even stick around? And that's the big question you have. So defensively, they're going to lose some guys. They're going to lose at least two of their starters at linebacker are out. The third hasn't decided whether he's going to go in the NFL or maybe the portal or whatever. So he'll probably play in this game, but we'll see some young guys there for sure. And then, they'll lose at least one defensive end that's going to the draft. And so it's hard to know what we'll see, but it'll be fun. And, the nice thing is everybody else is dealing with the same thing. Oregon State lost their coach, and that's who they play, and they lost a lot of their players as well. So it's essentially kind of a scrimmage. If anybody remembers the way back when there was freshman football and teams would bring their freshmen out and they'd play each other, that's kind of what you're looking at here.
So, in your opinion, looking at their skill set, Riley Leonard or Sam Hartman, who do you think might be better?
For this next year, I think Riley Leonard. And again, I think it's because of the tackle situation, and they just don't know what kind of pass protection they're going to get there. And I don't think Notre Dame's going to lose a top 10 pick and then another guy who has the potential to be a first round pick. He's just going out earlier than most people anticipated. So the guys they have coming in there, I think one of them certainly has the potential to be an NFL player, and it depends on who they choose as the other one. So I just think Leonard makes the most sense because he has the ability to run the football. They're going to need to be able to do that, and you need somebody who can avoid pressure, and he does a good job of that. So I think that had a lot to do with why he's the guy. And look, the guy's got NFL talent. He's got a big arm. He's huge in size, and he can run. So if you can coach him up a little bit in the passing game and get him throwing a little bit more accurately, then I think you got something that could be pretty good.
Thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate your time. Mike Frank, Irish Sports Daily. They pick up Riley